Hey everyone, it's Drayton from ScaleTrains, and I'm excited to give you a closer look at our all-new Rivet Counter HO Scale EMD SD7 and 9. Stay tuned. The Electromotive Division of General Motors Corporation took the railroad industry by storm when it announced the General Purpose 7 locomotive in October of 1949. This was EMD's first locomotive to feature a hood-style body, as opposed to the covered wagon car body style used on the F units. While the F units were popular and were great for getting trains from point A to point B, they weren't ideal switchers because, well, train crews couldn't look out a window as they were switching, running long hood or in reverse. So EMD experimented with what's known as the BL1 and BL2 series locomotive, BL standing for branch line. Unfortunately, that was not a very successful locomotive design. So in October of 1949, EMD unveiled its General Purpose series using a hood design by Dick Dilworth, which really, it was something that he thought about for a long time, and it really transformed the railroad industry. Now, railroads took a liking to Dick Dilworth's design, so much so that EMD decided in 1951 to offer a 6-axle version in the SD series, with SD standing for Special Duty. And in 1951, when this was introduced, railroads were still transitioning from steam to diesel power. As a matter of fact, most railroads had a nice mix of both. There were some regional railroads, regional class ones, like for instance the Chicago Great Western, the Pear Marquette, and larger railroads like Southern Railway that were very close to complete dieselization by the time this locomotive was announced. But very few railroads had completely dieselized. They were waiting for a locomotive that could be used over the road and in drag service. And while the GPs were great for industrial switching and even mainline running, they needed something that was more ideal for drag freight service like coal trains or iron ore, or even those slow merchandise trains that were coming out of new classification yards that were going up all over the country. So EMD's SD7 was the answer. It had 1,500 horsepower, much like its predecessor from the F series and the GP series, but it had 2 extra traction motors, giving the railroads more power on a single car body. And so the SD7s became very popular, and those extra axles also provided better adhesion, but they also spread the weight of the locomotive out amongst the axles. So if you had a lightweight branch line, for example, with bridges built out of timbers, they were better suited on those branch lines because the weight was more spread out. The axle loading wasn't quite as heavy as what it would be on a Jeep. Even though the Jeeps weighed less, the SD7s were really great for those branch line services. And a lot of railroads were happy with the SD7 design, but they really were looking for a little bit more horsepower. So the SD7s were manufactured from 1951 through the end of 1953, and in January 1954, EMD unveiled the 1,750 horsepower SD9 locomotive. Now, there were many more SD9s manufactured for many more railroads than there were SD7s, although the SD7 deserves a lot of credit. There were quite a few of those locomotives built, including for the Southern Pacific Railroad, which we are offering here in this first run. The SD7s were incredibly reliable locomotive series, and it's amazing because a lot of Class 1 railroads utilized their SD7s and SD9s well into the 1990s, some even into the 2000s. The SD9 basically looked the exact same as an SD7, although there is one major spotting feature difference. And the easiest way to tell the difference between an SD7 and an SD9 are the class lights. On an SD7, the class lights are centered above the number boards. On an SD9, they are more towards the outer edge of the number boards, and they are on almost like a stand, and they're kind of canted outward. And that's the easiest way to spot the difference. Now, when the SD9s began production in 1954, they utilized what's known as the pipe style handrails used on the earlier SD7 and GP7 locomotives. But the second phase of SD9s, they utilized what's known as a channel type handrail. And that's the kind of handrails that EMD still uses to this day. But those were not introduced until later in the production cycle of those locomotives. So SD9s were incredibly successful. A lot of railroads employed them all over the United States. A lot of them even ended up in Mexico and Canada on other assignments. But in this first run from ScaleTrains, we have a variety of road names. For instance, on SD7s, we have Union Pacific, which only rostered 10 of these locomotives with the unique lighting features, the light package on those locomotives. Of course, we've got Southern Pacific. These are the SD7Rs. And then, of course, Great Northern, which you can see to my left. Great Northern SD7s, beautiful paint scheme, the orange and green. Another road name that we're offering for the SD7s is the Chicago, Burlington, and Quincy, which also features a light package. These locomotives were used in both freight and passenger service, and they kept their steam generators through the 1950s. And then when it comes to SD9s, we're offering Norfolk Southern with and without ditch lights, which is pretty cool. That's a first in HO scale. And then we're also offering Conrail SD9. So in this video, we're going to kind of take a closer look at the Great Northern version for the SD7 and for the SD9, the Norfolk Southern version without ditch lights. Now, the ditch light version is going to be coming later. When we get production samples of that locomotive, we'll probably post a video of that. But one of the things I really want to stress when it comes to this SD7 and SD9 project is that this project began over 3.5 years ago. And it's really amazing, a true testament to our product development team for all the railroad, road number, and era-specific details. They've really gone through a lot of effort to make sure that we can offer a wide variety of SD7s and SD9s. And some of the versions that they have planned in future runs are really going to blow your mind. But there are some great firsts, being the SD7R. In the late 70s, Southern Pacific began rebuilding a lot of their older first generation EMD locomotives, and the SD7s and 9s were rebuilt. And the SD7Rs, which lasted through the 80s and 90s, some of them even operating on the Portland and Western Railroad up until a couple of years ago. These locomotives have never been offered before in plastic. And so it's a locomotive that SP modelers have wanted for years and years and years. And now it's here, ready to run right out of the box. And I personally cannot wait to have these locomotives on my personal layout soon. So without further ado, let's take a look first at the Great Northern SD7. We're going to do a startup sequence and some run-bys so you guys can get some up-close views of this locomotive running on our layout. All right, now that we've gotten a great up close and personal view of the SD7, let's take a look at the Norfolk Southern SD9m. So the SD9Ms are unique, the M standing for modified, because these locomotives were first rebuilt in the late 80s, and they had a lot of their electrical wiring replaced, they got a fresh coat of paint, the traction motors replaced or repaired, and basically Norfolk Southern increased the lives of these locomotives for over 20 years. It's incredible what their investment in the SD series did. And these locomotives were utilized in classification yards, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Bellevue, Ohio. They even saw local service in North Carolina toward the end of their careers. And the ditchlight versions especially, if you're a mid-2000s Norfolk Southern modeler, you're going to want these. It's really amazing. There's actually pictures of some of these SD9s running alongside Amtrak P42s in the mid-2000s. Just incredible. Forgot to mention, these locomotives also spent time in Inman Yard, not too far from our ScaleTrains headquarters here in Chattanooga, Inman Yard being in Atlanta. So that's pretty neat local history for us. So to be able to offer these locomotives accurately in HO scale is a really big deal to us. And we're so excited to see what the future of this SD series comes to. Like I said, you know, going back to the transition era, the SD7s and 9s came at a time where they were running right alongside the steam locomotives. And so, you know, it really is a testament to EMD that these locomotives were so well built that many of them lasted into the 90s, early 2000s, and some are even in operation today on short lines and at grain elevators across the Midwest. So we're really excited to be able to offer this locomotive in HO scale. You can pre-order these locomotives now from ScaleTrains.com or find a select retailer on our website. Delivery is expected later this year in the fall. We're hoping they'll be here in the fall, and we're really excited to be able to see them on your layout. So we're looking forward to these locomotives being delivered. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we really appreciate your business. If you're not subscribed yet to the ScaleTrains YouTube channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Ring the bell to receive notifications when we upload more videos like this. We've got some exciting content planned for you guys this year, including more from the ScaleTrains podcast. We recently dropped our first episode, and we've got many more to come. So stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.